We're muting everybody.
Oh, here comes Alex. Well, kia ora everybody, and welcome back to this afternoon's meeting. This time we're here for the Strategy, Growth and Community Committee meeting. It's the 27th of March, and we have got an apology from Billy Galbraith this afternoon. And so can I have a mover for that apology, please? So, Taylor. They're just noting that Mayor Alex is going to be in the building, or she's in the building, and she'll be coming soon, and so will Francie. Item 4, all those in favour? Great. Number 3, any declarations of conflict of interest? No. 4, standing orders. Can I have a mover for the recommendation of the following standing orders are suspended for this meeting, please? Thank you, Councillor Moynihan, Councillor Greer. All those in favour? Carried. Confirmation of minutes of the Strategy and Growth Community Committee meeting on the 12th of December. So this is our first one for 2025. Do I have a mover that those minutes committee are confirmed as true and correct? Councillor Moynihan and some Mugridge. All those in favour? Okay, number 6, we're on to the report section, which is the resolution monitoring report. Any questions about that report?
Just note we've got a further update to come back on the loan policy, so just working through timing on that one. But other than that, everything else is well in action. We've just noted the update on regional plans has been complete as well. Again, that's now been submitted, and we'll wait and see what respect to EIA on that one. So we marked that as complete now.
So recommendation, Strategy and Growth Committee notes that the resolutions monitoring reports. Do I have a mover? And Councillor Taylor. All those in favour? Point 2, implementation monitoring Waipukurau South Precinct strategy. One of our flagship projects and a very exciting place to be in at the moment. So thank you, Mr. Mugridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, so today I am giving you a little bit of an update in terms of the Waipukurau South Growth Precinct project. That is the project that for which we have received $10.9 million of crown funding to contribute to building infrastructure that will enable the ability to develop the precinct area around the old hospital site in Waipukurau. As you've just alluded to, Madam Chair, this is a bit of a flagship project in the sense that it is one of the levers that we have got to pull to deliver on strategy. The area was identified in the integrated spatial plan, and it is also a key project to deliver actually on the seven goals that we've got up there around from Project Thrive, with a particular focus on smart growth and durable infrastructure. The area has been zoned residential for over 20 years, but hasn't been able to be done. It has got the potential to accommodate over the next 15 to 20 years, up to 950 plus lots, which is pretty exciting. But again, some of the strategic objectives that existed within the integrated spatial plan and within Project Thrive is the ability to recognise the natural amenity of the area, to make sure that there are some clear links between Tavistock and Porongahau roads, and is really a project that will enable us to do that. We, just for this table, will be well versed to where we're at, but just for those that are listening, the program did face some delays following Cyclone Gabrielle in particular, where we had to essentially put a pause and refocus our resources on other priorities. But we're now back on track with the program. The program's actually been delivered out of the program delivery team. the CID group. But it's really important to recognise the infrastructure component. The funding is mainly to develop the 7 or 8 key projects that will enable servicing of the area. But there's, as I've alluded to, a real strategic component to this work, and this is why I'm presenting this report to this committee today. But we'll continue to take a bit of a dual approach in terms of how we will report progress between this committee and the Finance, Infrastructure and Performance Committee. In terms of the update that I have got from a progress perspective, the key focus over the last few months has been really in 3 key areas. We presented to you through a workshop a couple of weeks ago, councillors, the development of a structure plan for the area. A structure plan being a planning tool that will enable coordinate integrated development of infrastructure in the area, and also provide a little bit of an idea of the look and feel of the development of what we intend or hope it will look like over the next 15 to 20 years. You've got a copy of the draft structure plan as part of your report. We're currently in the process of finalising that draft, and we will shortly be engaging with community from a pre-engagement perspective, but we are also intending to provide you with the structure plan for formal adoption after to engage in public consultation, on the 5th of June. That's the plan at this point in time, with the idea being that the structure plan will go through the RMA process it needs to go through, and eventually make its way into our district plan. The second area we've been focusing on is around landowner engagement. In lieu of having a structure plan, what we've had to do is work really closely with the landowners in the area to, one, understand the aspirations that they might have for their own pieces of land, but B, to make sure for those that have development aspirations that want to subdivide their sections, that we can work in partnership with them to make sure that the developments that they are leading on are integrated. So we've got one subdivision that's already consented, and there's another one in the works. And it's been really good to be able to interact with those landowners and those developers to make sure that the layout essentially of the subdivisions work together and work with our broader aspirations for the area. As part of our agreements with the Crown, not from a funding perspective, but in terms of some of the housing and outcome objectives that we need to achieve, we've also got responsibilities as council in our role as sort of facilitators of this program of work to, I think the language in the agreement is to promote the opportunity for development in the area. That is something that we've also been working on in the background, is talking with developers, making sure that to the extent possible, people are aware of the development potential in this area and where the project is at and when the infrastructure may be built. But it is something that we also want to ramp up. As part of that conversation, there has been some discussions around bringing in, hopefully in the future, a retirement village type of facility or an aged care facility, recognising the close proximity to the centre of town. It's an ideal location for it, and based on the population and demographic statistics that we've got, is something that has been identified as being really needed and will be needed over the next couple of decades. The third area we've been focusing on is developing a robust comms and engagement strategy. There's multiple stakeholders involved in this work, but there's also a duty for us to bring the community along with us on this project. So we have been working in the background on doing just that, and there is at the centre of it all a dedicated web page that will be made available as a bit of a one-stop shop for the programme of work, but also as a place for community to provide feedback, to provide some of the experiences that they have in the past had with this quite historical and significant site in our district. So in terms of next steps, the focus will largely be around engagement and consultation. That's from a strategic perspective, recognizing that the infrastructure side of things is also progressing really well with the construction of the two first stormwater retention ponds nearing completion, which is really exciting as it will enable development to occur in that part of the area. As part of the structure plan process, we have formal obligations to consult with community following the statutory process. But what we're also looking at doing there is finding opportunities to engage with the broader community on the project to make sure that we get that feedback, to make sure the community comes along with us. So the sorts of things we're looking at there are going to be events like potentially like a barbecue day or potentially a planting day that we're thinking about around those stormwater retention ponds that I talked about before, an opportunity for the community to provide some feedback. And then the second area that we need to get underway, and this is where there's a tangible link to the next item we'll be talking about around economic development strategy, is really been proactive about engaging with some of those key developers and stakeholders. I mentioned before the retirement village type of outfit, that is something that so we're in the process of finalising a pamphlet, for example, that we'll be able to distribute with the likes of the Retirement Village Association to promote the potential there, but also directly engaging with some of the key players in that space. So that's the update that I've got for you today, but I'm happy to take questions.
Before we do that,
Well,
Awesome, sorry. Questions from everybody? That's it, yeah. It's one of the risks that's been highlighted is the perception of by some in the community that it is a social housing development area. And I know that we're restricted within our district and rules of what influence we can play and what kind of development takes place. But has there been any of the landowners or developers, you know, can we facilitate some sort of I don't know, governance or get the developers getting together and being sort of plan as well of what sort of housing they want in the area? So I know we've got a view on what we think it's going to look like, but how can we help it be a beautiful place to live?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I think as you've identified, councillors, the number of formal levers that we've got to pull are reasonably limited, and I do want to acknowledge that there has been a concern that has been raised by the community. One of the things that you have done that will potentially help this conversation as part of the last district plan review is actually increasing the minimum lot size to have lower density in the area, which is one of the levers that can be pulled through that regulatory process. But I think the second thing is through those conversations with the landowners and with the developers, we've been able to share the vision that we've got for this, and there is a clear understanding about what that vision is, and there is, as far as I understand it, an appetite from the known developers at the moment to share that vision. At the end of the day, the development potential, the market will dictate to a certain degree the development potential in the precinct. But through the engagement that we've been doing to date, and also through the engagement we've been doing through the Tamatea Housing Task Force, I think we have been able to generate a sort of a common understanding of where it is that we want to go. It's why it's so important to continue this conversation as well.
why are we waiting until June the 5th to talk to the community?
Through Madam Chair, we won't be waiting till June the 5th.
Right.
That's when we're going to be asking, well, that's when we're intending to ask council for adoption of the draft plan for public consultation. But in the lead up to that, and I apologise if that wasn't clear, but in the lead up to that, we are intending to engage with the the affected landowners, the neighbouring landowners, but also taking on board the feedback that was provided by this table is making sure that there are opportunities for the broader community to partake into this work.
So how far away is that then?
These through Madam Chair, the letters to affected landowners and neighbouring properties are ready to go, essentially. The intent being that they would be dropped off this week. What we are also wanting to finalise is a bit of a plan for some form of a community event that we can put people towards in the next I would anticipate the next 4 to 6 weeks to participate.
Is there, so I read and you reflected what you said about the promotion activities for the area and the responsibilities that council needs to take on under that contract. Have we thought about things like bringing in someone with commercial skills that can be there to be an agent or a broker, or to have some kind of grouping of those landowners who all agree that a particular agent is the agent, and so when we field a call, that's kind of where we field it to? Like, are we thinking like that?
Through Madam Chair, there's something that we have discussed. We're not quite there yet at the moment, but there's certainly the difficulty, which is also an opportunity, but the difficulty with this project being the multiple landowners that are involved and different people have different aspirations. But as we continue to have these relationships, I think that having a central point of contact with that sort of commercial background, development background, is something that we definitely need to that we have talked about before.
Like they've done it just outside of Havelock, they've almost got like a little set up on site here, because it's a huge area for development and that sort of stuff. But even if it's a billboard sort of content, people don't like to reach, don't know so who to talk to them. Yeah. What about the website? Is that, how far away is that from?
Through Madam Chair, it's imminent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Could we find a way to reflect our mana whenua and identity on the structure plan before it even goes any further? Because it doesn't reflect it at all.
Through Madam Chair, so the draft structure plan that you have is the for lack of a better word, the map.
Mappy thing.
Yeah. There will also be a chapter that sits alongside it, but as part of development of a structure plan, we have undertaken a cultural impact assessment, which is actually something that was commissioned and discussed quite at length at the Tamatea Housing Task Force, and so that is one of the reports that is certainly underpinning the structure plan and the associated chapter that is going to come with it.
Because, you know, like even in the promotional side of things, it's almost that speed.
Exactly, and part of what I wondered is that main stormwater wetland area at the northeastern corner currently sits on the Lins block, which is earmarked for Tamatea Pōkai Whenua. Even just in a naming of that wetland area that sits, the name is there before anyone else has looked at it, touched it. You know, I just think there might be some ways to show that. I mean, this doesn't show our identity as a district, I suppose is what I'm just trying to get to. So then how can we open that kind of opportunity?
So I'm writing all that down, so you want to see that. So any other questions? Question? My only thought, with the map, let's go back to the map. I still don't feel that there's enough connection between the area to the Whangaho Road. Just see, on there, there's thoughts and considerations there. It just doesn't go far enough for the connection. That we were hoping on something in that space, so. But yeah, looking forward to seeing how the communication side of things and that start to come together as to how we actually start to talk to our community about this. So yeah, also that. So can I have a moment for the recommendation, the monitoring, that we want to throw down growth posting strategy.
Yeah, I'm just excited to see this continuing to move forward, and it's a real opportunity for us to reconnect with our community about how we walk alongside and do things together. And I think that's a big part of the opportunity from this, and to unlock that growth as well. And it's holds lots of environmental strategy, economic development strategy, spatial strategy, all of these things kind of connect together on this project, and which makes it such an important launch pad for so many things, and it's really exciting. So I can't wait to see when those stormwater ponds are finished and when we can actually show community and have them touch and feel what's going on down there, because I think that's what we need to do.
The thing is that we get to be around to see some of it, which is not always, not always a thing that a lot of people get to ever sort of see. Okay, so we've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any against? On to red welcoming. 6.3 endorsement of the scope of the economic development strategy refresh, and Mr. Bridge back to the table.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and yes, apologies for Ms. Toswell, who is not with us today. Yes, so what I am going to be presenting today is seeking your endorsement of the scope of the refresh of council economic development strategy. You will recall that we talked about the Economic Development Action Plan back in December last year, and sought some guidance from the committee. But also you provided you with an update of where we are at in terms of the 61 actions contained in that strategy that was actually endorsed or adopted by council back in 2019. We've made some really good progress there, with 52 out of the 61 actions completed. What was also discussed at the meeting back in December was the broad recognition of the change in economic context that we've had since 2019. I think the first sentence in the Economic Development Action Plan talks about the unprecedented growth that we were experiencing at the time. And things have changed, as we all know, over the past few years. There has been actually some really good reports and analysis that's been undertaken at a regional level through the Regional Economic Development Agency, and as Mark and Jenkins, really good understanding of where we are at from a economic perspective in the region, and in Central Hawke's Bay. Also really important to recognise the change in operating environment that we have had since 2019. That's both at a national level, but also at a regional level. We obviously had the cyclone, but there's also the new government has come with their own ideas around economic growth, releasing only a couple of months ago their new program of work entitled Going for Growth. And this is not to say that we want to take this as to mimic what has been done by others, but I think it's really important that we take a good look as to what's happening in the operating context and make sure that we can tailor our approach to make sure that to the extent possible that it aligns with what the rest of the country or the region is doing. What we also discussed at the meeting in December, while there was broad agreement that a refresh of the strategy was warranted, there was a discussion to acknowledge that actually the 7 pillars that exist within this current strategy are still valid, even though the operating context has changed. But it's potentially there's potentially a need to essentially not necessarily change tech, but again, adapt our approach to still meet those objectives, but to make sure that they are heading in the right direction. We have gone back since that meeting and had a bit of a think about how we could refresh this strategy. The direction or the discussion we had was around a light touch type of refresh of the strategy back in December, and what we came up with was essentially 3 options of how we think we could do that. Those 3 options are laid out in your reports, and the option that we are recommending to take this work forward is option 3 in your reports, which is essentially a light touch refresh with a specific focus over the next 12 months on three key areas, which are water security, land use optimization, and growth and development. And then for a fuller refresh to be undertaken when at the start of the new triennium, to align with the new triennium direction, but also to make sure there's something in place before we undertake our next long-term plan to give that sort of strategic direction for the activity. The 3 focus areas that we're proposing for the next 12 months, as I said before, are number 1, water security, which is a critical strategic opportunity for the district. It addresses and it has the opportunity to address a number of the challenges that we face, be it environmental, social, economic, and it's also something that we need in the face of climate change. And to unlock growth opportunities for land, housing, and businesses. The second area of focus is around land use optimization. There's a slight tweak in language there. The pillar in the previous strategy was land use diversification, but I think this word optimization actually reflects what a lot of landowners, farmers, food and fibre producers are doing at the moment, which is actually optimizing the resource that they currently have to suit their needs and to ensure their economic and financial resilience as well. The actions that we're likely to be considering for inclusion in this focus area in the short term over the next few months are likely to be weighted towards continuation, activation of the investment that's already been made in terms of the seed drying facility at Ludlow Farm. There's a real opportunity based on the conversations that we've had there to capitalise on the investment that has been made at Ludlow Farms, but to provide broader economic benefits for not only Central Hawke's Bay, but also for the region. And just on that note, I just wanted to acknowledge the real success of Lou and Simon White at the Balance Farm Environment Awards, and Councillor Taylor may wish to talk about this as well, being a trustee of the trust. But Ludlow Farms took away the main award and a number of other awards on Tuesday night. So just wanted to acknowledge that, and also the very strong representation of Central Hawke's Bay farmers and the finalists and the award winners. And I think one of the reflections that I've had having attended the night is actually that land use optimization was at the core of every of the 3 finalists that were discussed. So that sort of area of focus is somewhat illustrated by those achievements. And the third area of focus that we're proposing is around growth and development, leveraging infrastructure projects, but also working on attracting new businesses, support construction, enable housing as per our Tamatea Housing Task Force, our home strategy, and attracting that investment in the district for it to grow, with a particular focus in the next 12 months on identifying options for industrial and commercial growth as well. You've got the list of pros and cons in your report. But yeah, on balance, we thought that the hybrid option between the two, between a short-term refresh and a long-term type of refresh was actually a hybrid option. Let's get underway with focusing on these key activities because there's some real opportunity and tangible outcomes we believe over the next 12 months and come back to it in the new triennium to set the new direction for the next long-term plan. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Questions? Thanks. Yeah, all right.
Am I allowed to invent? Madam Chair?
Of course you are, you're at this table.
A couple of things that occurred to me with the priorities coming through. And when I think about that regional architecture review conversation we had before about being really clear about what we want to move on. Even the last economic development action plan, it didn't put at the front that we want to grow GDP per capita, we want to grow jobs, and we want to increase household incomes. And to be honest, I think probably an evolution of that is we want to increase housing security, which is probably a slightly one, and actually put some numbers on it and actually be really specific about it. So it's not, you know, it's not unclear. We can really own it. And so I just wonder whether we could consider that and when we do the refresh.
Yeah, and through Madam Chair, one thing I do want to own is the fact that I know that was raised at the workshop, and as I was preparing my notes last night, I remembered I was going to put something about measurement in the report, and I omitted to do that. So I do apologise, but especially reflecting on some of the targets that we have got up on the wall back there and providing some metrics on measuring progress is important.
Cool. I also in that we have the regional deals PO on housing and where it connects to our growth and development one. I wonder whether there's an action area that should be about scoping up what's the kind of special purpose vehicle that developers might need to develop at scale here in Central Hawke's Bay, which is different to how a developer might have to operate in Hastings. Like if we need to go to bat for a regulatory or a legislative mechanism to unlock some of that development here, what would that need to look like? So I wonder whether that should be there. And the other thing is there's a couple of other things that I think it's worth connecting to. One is that particularly in the water security and land use optimization, is that Plan Change 6 is 10 years old this year, and there's a real opportunity to have a bit of a lessons learned on it, because when I raised this at the regional council, the regional collaboration day on Friday, like to be honest, regional council gave a pretty rubbish answer, which was not really an answer, where we probably could look through that lens of going, well, we've got different types of water use and we've got different types of land, and have we actually been achieving what they thought even environmentally? Like, has it lifted the river flows? You know, what they've been doing. So just wonder if we should connect into that. And the other thing was in the land use optimization is that the regional council does have this program they're called Land for Life, which is a bit about that optimizing where you use trees and how you look at slope and all that kind of stuff. So making sure we connect that.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Those are all good ideas, and in terms of going forward with this work, if the committee were to endorse the option we're putting forward, the intent would be for the sort of the final strategy, refresh strategy, to be presented at the next committee meeting. I forget the date now, sorry, but the intent would be to bring something back to you in workshop with a suite of actions, so that we can include in there as well. So all of that feedback is really valuable and what we can consider.
It's really important to go back on the old data and the reasons why some of these things we put in place, and actually here, like so 10 years on test, is it still true, and did they get the intended outcomes? As part of that project.
So I just wonder whether between now and the next meeting, you know, the approach that the committee took on the waste minimisation stuff, to have a little bit of a working group to touch, and like whether this is a project that might need that too.
Somebody else would like to be part of it? Touching with me, Alex, then. And between the two of us, yeah, but none of you can complain. Very on their face, so he can't. My only feedback was around the growth and development is that that under business and development and attraction, obviously a key part of business development and attraction will be actually having infrastructure and smart growth in there. So just taking into account, you know, I trust that all of the other stuff will probably be considered, but yeah, the sort of recognizing that to attract business, you have to have the infrastructure that they can, like, you know, like the South Growth Project saying you can build as many houses as you like, but if you haven't got the infrastructure there to support it, then it never happens. And the same with the industrial area in Waipokoro. So that's certainly something I'd be really interested in. And that was certainly something that came out of that smart growth meeting at the conference. But yeah, I think we'll certainly get a few things going, and definitely really keen to see some of that reporting around water security and the economic benefits to Central Hawke's Bay, getting that back on the table. All the other stuff is absolutely still very, very vital. And we're talking about the strategy, economic development strategy at the moment. I think we're really going to make sure that we know our stuff in all of that in today's context, which is really important. Questions, ideas.
I think option 3 is the right option, and I'm wanting to move that.
Second. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor.
On behalf of Mayor Alex. No, that's a good piece of work. It'd be good to have a refresh of it before we actually get into deep diving into it.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 6.4, Civil Defence Emergency Management Transformation Strategy Update and Next Steps.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I won't speak too long to it, but I will probably point out for those particularly online, just the background and how we've in particular, just recognising, obviously, we had the events of Cyclone Gabrielle and the subsequent Mike Bush, or quoted as kind of the Mike Bush, the independent review into Cyclone Gabrielle and the overall effectiveness of the CDM performance on terms of cyclone, the response to Cyclone Gabrielle. The transformation strategy was really in response to that independent review, setting out a clear strategy of the things we need to do and when we need to do them by to deliver on that review. I've presented this report just really to reiterate for this council now that the transformation strategy has been adopted by the committee in late January, just potentially what this council can expect in terms of its current obligations and further expectations of uplift that we may need to do in terms of CDM responsiveness and preparedness under the 4 Rs, being reduction, readiness, response and recovery. Probably the notable thing for us really and for all councils is a real shift back to stronger local leadership. So it's not saying that everything is centralised. It is a decentralisation back to local leadership. Again, just for us, we've had that for a long time, but really been really cognizant that there is a much stronger and much more defined approach for the district moving forward. In the background sections, look, there's some legislative responsibilities we have. Again, you will be clear on those, but probably the key parts that I just would like to bring our attention to are actually on page 28, which are really more of the readiness and response areas, and they're going to be the areas that we're going to need to focus on. It's not saying that reduction and recovery aren't important things. We've got existing bodies of work for that across the business, particularly in the reduction area. Again, you can reflect on your own priorities about climate change and resilience, and some work packages that we've got underway on that one. But particularly in terms of our ability to be ready to respond and ready to ensure community has an appropriate level of response in place. Again, will be the key focus of the transformation. Again, that aligns particularly with the 2 risk items which I've identified in the report that sit on our risk appetite summary that's reported into risk and assurance as well. So and they're mentioned on the top of page 29. Look, just with that, Madam Chair, happy to take any questions, but again, just really just noting there's more work to do, bringing the strategy back to this table now that it has been formally endorsed back in January, and just segueing for this district and this council further work that we're going to need to continue to focus on for next year's ahead. So, yeah, happy to take any questions from you, Madam Chair.
Questions on that one? It's Manhen.
Yes, just on page 64, where we've secured funding from Ministry of Business, Innovation, Employment to install solar panels on 4 of our community facilities, which is great. And
It's actually the next. Yes,
Be the social code.
oh, sorry.
Keep asking it because. Well, no.
Oh, wait.
Hold that one.
Civil defence.
It is, but it is
Yeah.
deliberately one after the other, because when you get this, one did feed into the other. That's a bit.
Yeah.
Sorry. This through you.
Questioners.
Yeah. How is CEDAM currently funded?
For you, Madam Chair, it's mostly funded through regional by the regional council. So we have a small contribution that we fund locally. So it's only about 15 or 20,000 that sits inside our budgets for smaller things. Most of the work that and again, the next report would reflect that most of the major investment we've made in these last 12 months has been through external funding. But at the core, the operations is currently funded through the regional CEDAM rate, which is collected by regional council on behalf of everybody.
So, while I see, decentralising and bringing it back to the people that do it, I agree with. Is this another example of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council collecting a rate? For instance, with the Hawke's Bay Tourism, but we don't actually see a discount in the Hawke's Bay regional rates. But we've got to start rating for it.
So the next steps that we need to work through are service level agreements are one of the really key things. So we still haven't confirmed yet the 2027 LTP. Will we break away from a regionalised approach to rating for CEDAM? There will still be some things that will need to stay at the centre, but the intent, potentially some of the intent may well be that some of that comes back locally as well. So I don't think it's a deliberate, I don't think those decisions have been made yet. Certainly those conversations haven't been had at a joint committee level, and NERICS may wish to talk to that. But from my perspective, they are the things that we still have to work through over these next 24 months in terms of how we deliver on transformation. The reality is, at some point, somebody's got to pay. It's just working out where in the system who pays for what. And the service level agreements will be in particular a key tool to make sure we are clear about what the expectation is to be funded from the centre and what potentially in the future may come back.
So can you please explain what will happen on the 1st of July?
Sure can. Through you, Madam Chair. So on the 1st of July is what we're aiming for is the effective kind of go live date of the new structure. So so that is basically where the aim is that we've got draft SLAs in place for the large part to make sure that we have again clarity around the roles of each of the different organisations and the roles that we play, but also that the aim is that by the 1st of July, pretty much the new structure, which will be a decentralised structure, is up and running in place. So that's the aim, ready to, you'll see on page 27, in the first column there is a number of goals for us to achieve. One of the really big ones, and that is about exercising. So there's 11 exercises across the region to occur from the 1st of July through to the end of December. So across that will be, again, making sure we've got the structure in place ready to deliver on those exercises.
So this is happening from July through you, Madam Chair. So the structures, the work that we're doing with this, and yet in answer to Councillor Burns' question, I think before, you said that the rates system doesn't change until 27.
Correct. Yeah. So everything will remain substantially funded from the centre. So at least 20.
So we get funding from that to do what we're doing here.
So all of those pieces are parts of the jigsaw that we're working through currently in the SLAs. So that could well be that the funding is delivered out, or just thinking about, I won't stick with employment to be an example, but there may well be some funding that is collected at the centre and handed directly back to us as part of that SLA, and that might be part of how we do it in the short term. Or alternatively, it might be resources or things that are procured and managed at the centre, and exactly like currently happens with our emergency management advisor. They're employed at the centre for the services. So there are all the things that we're going to need to work through in these next few months as we work to draft the service level agreement. Between us on.
If that things like training, sort of stuff, and so then you have to identify key staff that will be civil defence managers and officers in their existing roles, and that sort of stuff, but this is not new stuff.
So that's existing stuff that we already
Yeah,
do.
we
It's
already
being more, it's trying to be more transparent and clear about what the roles and expectations are of each agency. So things like weather warnings and the level of expectation that comes from HBRC to group or HBRC to us. What's the level of service that we can expect from HBRC in terms of appropriate weather warnings? How often? What are the response times? And so that will be a large part of.
So was that never an expectation before?
It's been, so there's an existing MOU that sits between regional council and group as the administering authority. So there's an existing document for that in place, but substantially no. So there's operating. There are operating procedures and those sorts of things that have been identified, but not formal SLAs that sit between all the different councils. A large part of that has come back to, again, recognising that prior to cyclone, we're in the third cycle of change, where prior to Cyclone Gabrielle, end of 22 was a structure to look at, again, not decentralising, but being clear about what the roles were. And that was part of, SLAs were part of the work program back in 2022. So it's now just having got through Cyclone Gabrielle, having got through the bush review, the independent review, now being in the transformation strategy. And the difference, probably in my view, this time is we've got some resource and we've got a different structure.
It's really confusing, if I'm honest. So I don't know about you guys, but I don't, let's see that. My only worry is that it's just going to cost us so much more, and we're not actually going to see anything different. I mean,
So my take on this transformation strategy and what it means for us is that actually we've been operating. So remember Matt described it as we need not just regional and not just local, we need regional and local. And I think that's a really helpful way to describe it. And actually us and Wairoa in the existing group plan already have regional and local. The problem is actually Hastings and Napier, who have not had local, they've had regional together, and that's where we've had the problem. So on the ground, what we see in terms of the resourcing, it's not necessarily any different, apart from I think we need to expect more regional support from the regional group in terms of the professionalised staffing that we have to support us and provide assurance. And the assurance that we can get from particularly regional council about the level of service they're going to provide on things like risk ownership and research, which happens regionally already, but we miss out. We've got gaps in our risk knowledge because it hasn't been done yet. So we need to push on that, and we need to push on the monitoring and warning stuff so that we can have proper local plans that say when the water hits this, we do this, which we don't have yet. And I think there was always assumptions that we had that and we actually didn't. So that's what we've got to put on. So what we see here is not really necessarily going to be that different. We're just going to see a more professionalised centre to support us so that we don't just get left to flounder on our own when everything goes wrong.
the interesting thing with that is that what council is going to take on that level.
Legislative.
Regional council got the responsibility to get to warn us about the levels and all that sort of stuff. And my concern and my question within that would be, we didn't get that in the last cyclone. What's different now? And do they have to sign up to it? Because the level of risk in getting that wrong is that people can die, which is terrifying. So why, like, who wants to? But if that's the legislation.
But that is also their, they have a responsibility, that's their mandated responsibility as a regional council to provide those functions. So,
But also, just to join the dots, that independent flood review report that regional council had done was really good. And there was one particular table in it that showed how community by community we have to test what level of risk we are willing to take and how we deal with that. So you go, in Waipokoro, we've got stop banks that perform to this level of service. So most of the risk is mitigated by that. The warnings and the evacuations are mitigated by this, this bit of service. You go to Onga or Porongaho, where there's currently no flood protection, then actually the warning systems is the big bit that we need to be able to help keep them safe. And so community by community, we need to think about it. We need to work through it like that. And so the region, the centre has not had the maturity to be able to do that before, but the independent review has suggested that to them, and we have to hold them to account on that. Because they're not considering really where that risk lies for us currently in the way that they're doing that level of service, and we need to push them to do it.
I guess I'm the right question. All right. But I think councillor asked what I was thinking, but the only other thing is, because it says in the response that council will need to adequately resource its CDM activities to meet its legal obligations. You think after the cyclone and the report, do you think our legal obligations have got tougher to meet that standard, or are they about the same?
you, Madam Chair, though, I don't think the legislative standards changed. I think the community expectation has changed. And certainly when you reflect on the risk appetite that's inside, you told us you have a very low risk appetite in terms of being underprepared or community being underprepared for a civil defence emergency. So I think where there is going to have to be a challenge, and Mayor Alex started talking about it before, is what is the level of risk and the level of investment, and when is enough in terms of mitigating that risk, and what is an appropriate level of service in relation to mitigating that risk. There will be some, and Mayor Alex and I heard about it at the Joint Committee on Monday, and I've heard it in some different forums that I sit on as the chair in terms of, so within group, we'll be having a new performance and assurance function, which will be about how are you working to meet what we think is a minimum threshold of what is okay. Currently, there are no national thresholds or standards of what okay is. So there's you can do some kind of assessments at a base level, but there's nothing that says to be good or to be great based on these 5 things. This is how you should be prepared. And that's a large focus of the work that NEMA are currently doing in terms of a very similar language to us, a performance and assurance function. I think theirs is the other way around. It basically sets some standards of what, based on the legislation, what good actually looks like. So that's going to be an important thing that may require us to make further investment when standards are set at a national level, which currently there aren't any.
So next steps, the committee can expect a further update at the next meeting. And we'll include an update and assessment of capability and new initiatives for locally implement strategy. And that's also based on what we're also going to hear next in the social stuff, because we're already sounds about streets.
The work underway, and certainly in terms of the SLAs, as we work through those, there'll be some important updates to be clear about potentially what we might need to agree to in terms of as we start to draft the service level agreements between ourselves and others. And good visibility about those bodies of work and other training bodies of work underway as well.
Can I have a mover that the Hawke's Bay Civil Defence Emergency Management Transformation Strategy update is received? All those in favour?
Right.
Against? Page 45, are we up to? Yes, 6.5, the progress on our own social recovery actions. And we'll look at on lunch, we were just to see here's some of the trailers that have been created for our community, which was really cool.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to you, Madam Chair. I'll take my report as read. Just, I guess, want to highlight summary, particularly in the social sector funding to start with. That's itemised in the report. This report initially went to the Joint Committee in January, which was a complete overview of all of our recovery actions since Cyclone Gabrielle. This has been focused in just for the social co-activities, which pulls in the sustaining community wellbeing and the building community resilience work programs. In terms of sustaining community wellbeing, we're coming to the end of that external funding piece of work. That was the 135,000 we received through the regional social sector grant, and realigned that work program to the regional social sector recovery plan. So that was very much around the navigational support, connecting our communities, supporting our network and networks, and we've just submitted our final funding report on that. But just to highlight a couple of activities that are ongoing just for the next couple of months. The first one is in terms of supporting the older persons network. We're aware there's an Active Ageing Expo on today, and hot off the press, and we have copies, no reflection on age demographic at all, is an older person's guide to emergencies, which we have adapted from, say, Civil Defence Emergency Management and customised to be a localised Central Hawke's Bay publication. We've given out 165 copies this morning at the Older Persons Expo. This is a result of probably 18 months' work when the regional publication was first produced, and then we've been out consulting with focus groups in our community who have given us feedback on what it needed to look like for our community. So this has been funded via that social sector grant, and we have an ongoing work program up to International Day of the Older Person in October this year around filling the gaps for those that haven't been able to get these in person, and ongoing education in that space. The other people working in that social sector recovery is supporting our disability network, and we have a psychological first aid course that we're funding tomorrow for our disability network partners attending. Now that that social sector piece has started to wind down, it's very much a focus now on building community resilience. And I have previously reported to you in work stream. Thank you for the opportunity to present the trailers to you today. I hope that was helpful in terms of putting some context around the words that we have. We're still responding with some wellbeing initiatives as they arise, an example being one of our Purongaho Kaumatua, who has been in emergency accommodation since Cyclone Gabrielle, and approximately 6 weeks ago, I think, moved into a Kaiangora home in Maipukara, and we've been actively working with her to support that transition. So still responding to individual cases as they come up. Just to highlight in terms of the resilience work program, page 61 and 62 of your paper has the project analytics around where we are tracking with the community hubs. This is very much the work stream that's in alignment with the transformation strategy, which is having community at the heart of emergency management and building community resilience. The hubs are at different states, I guess, of coordination. Some have had 2 or 3 practice sessions and if need be could open their doors. Others have their equipment and are just starting to practice their training. I do want to acknowledge last time I spoke to you, we were planning the Takapo meeting and we had staff around to make that happen. So we're working with the community for a date there after the school holidays to get that one. And the Omakere community, we've been working with their schools under rebuild at the moment, and they're looking at options around what that might look like. So those are probably our 2 big communities to continue on with. On the trailer conversation at lunchtime, I mentioned the sign writing to go onto those. That's part of a bigger branding project for the branding for the community hubs. We haven't publicised those applications yet because this is very much setting the communities up for success, that if they have the sign on the door to say they're a community hub, they are confident they can open the doors and have the skills they need. So that will be, we're working for the end of June to have that piece of work done where we can produce the mapping to go live in terms of these are the hubs they can stand up if we need to. We did have confidence prior to Christmas with the potential adverse summer drought, contacting the hubs about the fire risk, and if we had to contact them to open, would they? And that was really positively received. A little bit out of the scope of how the hub would normally work, but it was at the time. Couple of big equipment purchases. So last week we had the sign off and the procurement of the emergency communications equipment. So we've just ordered 20 suitcase radios. I will have one for your next meeting or at a workshop to talk you through what that looks like. Suitcase radios, the handheld radios, identical to what Hastings District Council have purchased. So we've purchased 20, one for every hub, one for the trailers. There will be one here. They operate on a digital frequency, which means our hubs can have a chat room. So Tikakino could talk to Ellsthorpe, who could talk to Parongaho, and they can all talk to us. It's not on the emergency services frequency, so we're keeping that free. And if we lose the digital network, the handheld radios, you flick the switch and you revert back to the VHF frequency, which is the old school style radios, which come into this building as well. So we're working through, we've done the procurement and estimated a June delivery date for that because some of the components for those radios aren't in the country at the moment. And alongside that, working on the communications guide for the hubs and working through Hawke's Bay Sedum with their arrangement. AREC, which is the Amateur Radio Association, who have an MOU with Sedum to do volunteer training. So we would look at running volunteer workshops, perhaps if the state highway 15 hubs together, doing a radio network into here. So that's all going to be built around when the radio delivery comes. And also the solar installation. So 2 sites are completed. We have 2 to go, one being Onga Onga, and that building, the solar is actually going onto the play centre roof because that's the north facing roof. It also isn't part of the heritage listed building, which makes that process slightly easier. And the Civic Theatre in Waipukurau. So both of those are having outline plan drafts submitted to council for consent at the moment. We have the funding for those. I mentioned in the report, each site was capped at 100,000 through MB. The Civic and the Central Hawke's Bay Civil Theatre both were slightly over that, but the DIA funding that we received has allowed us to do that workshop funding for that. The renewable energy, that fund that those have come through has since transferred through to the Energy Commission, so our contracts have been moved over to them, and it looks like there will be a second round made available, but we don't know what that looks like yet. But we're just putting ourselves in a position that we would have other facilities on the list if we were asked to submit sites for consideration. So going forward for the next 3 months, the focus is to finalise all the hubs, have the branding in place. Mrs. Dixon from Hawke's Bay Sedum and I are starting hub audits next month, which is equipment checks for all of them, signing off on the audits and having the hub pages completed for our emergency operations centre here, which is the logistics piece of it. And then it will be the ongoing testing and training. Any questions at all?
No, you answered my question. Thank you. And I just said, was there any overruns? The money we received, has there been any overruns for the projects we've completed? But you've actually answered that. Well done. Just one little question. What do you consider an older person?
Thank you.
40 or 80?
You want to go to the next?
Thank you. For you, Madam Chair, I did invite my husband to the expo this morning and he was 54 and he asked the same question, so I'll leave that there.
I don't need one.
Oh, you don't?
But there are copies available.
No, well done.
Thank you.
Oh, just one quick. Just that with these solar panels, maintenance of them, is that our responsibility? You know, you have to clean them I don't know when you do, but.
Yeah, 3 million, yes, it is, and we're doing the maintenance schedule probably to coincide with the hub equipment audit, so it's a seamless process. You would have also noted in the report we've applied through the Department of Internal Affairs Community Facilities Fund, which I think is the first time we've done that for 2 kitchen renovations. Sorry, 2 roof replacements, being Otani and Takapō Halls, because they were 2 sites identified potentially for solar, but they weren't fit for purpose in terms of the condition of the roof. So we're trying to get that alignment. If successful, that's a 2/3 contribution with us funding 1/3, and the 1/3 is being held within the council hall's budget at the moment. So that comes through, we'll know by the beginning of June.
And we've got a presentation this morning about those aspirations for. Yeah, so that is part of consideration. Solar panel installation, that would be really good, yeah.
Yeah, I had a question about the Takapō being part of that, the roof thing, because didn't they get 20 grand or 25 grand from the cyclone washout relief, something?
Yes, thank you, Jo. Yes, they did, for remedial repairs, but it will still only make
Oh, okay, very good.
Yeah, it
Thank
was
you.
enough.
short term.
So,
Was a plaster from the.
Okay, so any further questions? Recommendation that the Strategy Growth and Community Committee receives a social climate update. Can I have a moment for that, please? And Richmond and second. Hello.
I just really want to also think working with our marae and stuff like that as well. See that that's what it is with so,
Probably just swapping quickly to a FEMS hat. You see a lot of this work done, the LAC work that we're doing, that what Hastings is doing, we've been asking what Aroa is doing, and we're reflecting what's going on around the region in terms of building these hubs and making the communities more self-sustainable. I just hope that we're not. This is a very positive thing, but I hope we're not giving ourselves more maintenance and checkups and things later on. But it's nice to know that if there's a system in place and a service level agreement and things like that, that it will keep on being front of mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
And anyway, and the reality is that in 20 years' time, people sitting in our seats after us, they discussing what they're doing with these trailers now and whether or not they can continue to service these hubs and things like that.
Cyclone for the next 2 years.
And that's the thing that's the life.
I was just gonna say it's all yours.
I don't need one of them.
I'm giving one to my mother-in-law.
Oh.
She was too.
Free charm.
Yeah, actually, she knew about it.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've moved to second. All those in favour? Carried. Okay, 6.6 community funding policy review. Mrs. Renata. To the table.
So see, you're still staying.
Good afternoon, councillors. The matter before you is a review of the community funding policy. And this policy was due for review in December 2025, but it's been brought forward with the development of the CHB crowd fund and the need to have it included in the policy. The details of that are on page 7 of the policy document and replicated in council paper before you. There's been no other notable changes to this policy. So the recommendation before you today is that the Strategy Growth and Community Committee adopts the revised community policy. Sorry.
Maybe just, Madam Chair, just probably add on to this is there's a clear section on the back end of page 155, which talks about this being the kind of the first step, and you'll councillors recall in the workshop we had back in February, I think it was actually off the top of my head, some further work on the future of the CHB Proud Fund and other funding mechanisms, and we've got an aim to bring something back to the next strategy growth and community meeting. But really just recognising for now this is the first step to see the funds that have been secured through the sales of the t-shirts, in particular CHB Proud t-shirts, basically to create a process and some formality around getting. It's a small amount of funding currently, but it's still funding and a good process to get that out. So really noting that there will be further steps to build on both the CHB Proud Fund and other opportunities for the wider fund network in the future. So, District's Future Fund, I think it's called, in the works.
Yes, I'm just thinking out of the square here, but I don't even know if it's possible. We have to change the policy. But I did see Alex request what was left over in these funds. So my question is, could it be possible that any surplus funds unused from any other of the community funding areas, could they be transferred to other areas that need it in that group? Is that possible?
Through you, Madam Chair, on some of them potentially, I'm just thinking particularly with of the Community Pride and Vibrancy Fund, we don't necessarily always expend all of that every year, so that could be an opportunity.
Just thinking, I don't know how you buy a t-shirt, but that could last 5 years.
Yeah,
and they might need a top up. I'll just
certainly something we can bring back in the further that next step for the next SGC meeting. So bring further information back on it.
I'm really interested in innovation and how we can actually create more funds into that fund space. And so yeah, if you can add that as part of it. I mean, even just the conversation around the maintenance contract and things like that, you know, some of our contractors that are going for huge, massive contracts, what's their give back to CHB Proud sort of fund focus, you know, work and things like that. Yeah, so I'm really, where my interest is what we do to actually build this fund. And I think that's a really good idea that what Councillor Monahan has come up. The other thing that I don't see included here is my thoughts around the town centre themes funding and whether or not that actually needs to be in this policy for the future, so that when the community go to all the trouble to come up with a plan, actually want to implement something, then they actually have a process, robust process that when we go to it, they can apply to it, and then it's decided so that the money isn't necessarily taken and used elsewhere, that the money set aside for community plans is allocated to community and they get to know the clear process somehow. But that's another thing I'd love to see considered in this while we're having these conversations live.
Yeah, I think in addition to that, through the federal funding, I thought we had got some money for money set aside for not so much for the bigger towns, but for our smaller towns, and I'm just wondering. Yeah, and the other, pardon?
We spent it on stormwater.
Not all of it. There was
there was some funding for some wins, and I've got an update on that coming back. So we'll provide it once I've got that. We'll provide a further update back to the committee.
And I know that when you're talking about the CHB Proud Fund, it's just examples, but most of them seem to be about green spaces and rubbish, which is fantastic. But I'm also thinking about, 15 years ago, we built, the community built the band rotunda in Waikawa, and that's an example of being proud of our community. And I'm just wondering whether, I mean, goodness knows we could never find a band rotunda with our current funds, but those sorts of projects should be able to apply to the CHB Proud Fund. It's just not an example at the moment.
Oh, and I was singing the Pride and Vibrancy.
Either one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what is needed, but we got to start somewhere. You know, every tree starts with a seed, and so yeah, we're trying to put stuff in place and levers and might thank us for. Yeah, Alex.
I would like to know what happened. So Sport New Zealand, CBOS, Creative Communities are all pretty clear, but the Community Pride and Vibrancy and the Environment and Sustainability Fund, apart from 1 year, we've never spent all of the allocation, what's in the policy. Why has that funding not accrued in those accounts?
Through you, Madam Chair, because they've not been held as special reserve. They would set up a special reserve fund.
Right.
We could do that. It's certainly an option. We could do that.
Because it doesn't specifically say in the policy that it's only topped up every year. It just says $20, 20,000 or whatever it is each year. So
currently they just sit as a GL and they're not treated. Mr. Chamberlain, we've got a separate policy which talks about all the reserve accounts. So it may well be that if that's the appetite of the council, we can certainly look to at end of year wash up. That might be one of the things, and we could bring back that to set those up as special accounts.
That's the dream, like, you know, like, I know the whole idea of this committee in the past was that we had to be the drivers of all of this stuff, but we've got in that season. We've moved and we've evolved in every area of this business. Needs to be thinking about statutory safeguard, needs to be thinking about roadside rubbish, needs to be thinking about housing, waste minimisation, you know, all the economic development strategy, all of that sort of stuff. And that's the kind of stuff we want to see reflected in those reports. You know, like when there's a like this, then our chief financial officer is also going, okay, these are the innovative things that we do here and that sort of stuff. And when Mark's talking procurement, he's thinking, okay, CHB Proud Fund, but also actually, you know, economic development, how can we make sure that and a part of the money goes back to our community. So it's about actually everybody thinking strategy rather than one person having to continuously trying to push the strategy up into all of the areas all the time. And so that's my dream and that's my idea of 6 years. And I think you want a measurable outcome in 5 years' time, when people are sitting here talking about potentially this kind of a thing, then it's actually got quite a bit of money and innovation attached to it, because people think that all areas of this business. Yeah, so that's just my little rant. Well, hopefully inspiration.
Madam Chair, I actually wonder whether, I mean, that this policy talks about how to collect the funds and how to spend the funds. I actually wonder whether the strategy is to actually not talk about how we spend the funds. We set the fund up and we focus on how we build it, rather than putting criteria on how we spend it. Because that might just give it a bit of time and space for it to settle in, and then it can build up before we then have a further conversation about what you would do with it. Because, you know, the CHB Proud Fund for specifically established for community-led initiatives, and it talks about things that are to do with community activation, but then Councillor Byrne has raised the examples given are all sort of really environmentally focused community activation. Which is quite a small area, and it could be done on any of the other funds. So I wonder whether we actually just keep it that this is going to be for Proud Central Hawke's Bay activation in the future, but actually our focus right now is to build it rather than spend it.
The recommendation, could we still adopt it though as a policy today, and then was that with the intention that it might be worked with and can get.
Well, we've still got further work to do around the Community Futures Fund, the work that Jenny was doing. So the aim is the next SGC. So you could adopt it today, but I think there's also a separate conversation picked up before about how we manage, particularly like the Community Pride and Vibrancy Fund, and just some options around how those two, with a special accounts policy, how we manage that for those reserve accounts as well. It's probably a bit more, either way, quite way.
Just as long as we. Yeah. We can just about that and then discuss that. The recommendation is that this committee adopts the revised community funding policy. Thank you, Mrs. Maxwell. Yes, you can.
But I suggest that we need to say we adopt the policy, but we've given guidance that the CHB Proud Fund is not yet ready for a strategy for allocation.
Second there.
I think I've seen that already.
That's the one. Did you want to say?
No, it's just good to see another stream that community can follow for. And it's actually within the initiative. But we can enable. Right moment. Eventually.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Any against? Great. Okay, so the next is the date of the next meeting, recommendation that the next strategy growth and community committee be held on the 22nd of May, 2025. Councillor Wishman, thank you, Councillor Mugridge. All those in favour? Carried. And the time of closure is 3:03. And goodbye to anybody that was taking time out to watch it online.